Hey, how's it going, my friends? Welcome back, and thanks to all my friends in Indonesia and India. You guys have been supporting Jumper and my reviews, so thank you very much, guys. And make sure you subscribe if you're from Indonesia and India and you're watching this. Uh, Feel free to subscribe. I'm gonna leave like a Hindi and Indonesian comment down on the uh, comment section below, so you guys get that I'm aware you guys are following my content and I'm thankful for it and I want you guys to keep supporting it. So I feel with Dreamers, Bertolucci's film, it's just very erudite, it's very bookish, it's very connoisseur. I don't feel it's an intro film. I don't think it's the type of film that should just be reviewed by a beginner. I feel it should be appreciated by a connoisseur of cinema. So it should be more of an advanced task. However, I really like the film and I like the young protagonist, so I felt I'm gonna do it anyway to just bring you guys an idea of what all my thoughts are. And I feel this gives me confidence to start doing it with music as well. Just give you guys an idea of what my thoughts are on this work, and then as in the future, as I become more knowledgeable of the film, of film history, of film theory, to bring you guys a different this film through different lenses. And you can see I chose the picture of Isabelle played by Eva Green, and it's very old. There's an old charm to her bedroom, to that pretty much her whole house. You can see in the walls, like it feels like it has been cut, this wall tapestry, but it feels very quaint and very beautiful in its own way. So in this second part, we see how the twins and Matthew grow together. We see that Matthew passes the test by running into the museum with the twins. He copies the Bande Apart by Jean-Luc Godard. This is a French New Wave film, and the twins accept him as one of them, similar to the film Freaks by 1932 by Todd Browning. And this film is very also very touchy, and it's different in a way because all the characters have some form of disability, and there's a woman trying to take advantage of the main character. So it's very emotional in its own way, and it was well received in Italy from what I heard, and in Europe in general. I saw it and I could see that it's very moving in its own way. Well, I felt like at the beginning, like the Hollywood audience wasn't that receptive to it. So we see the story started to become more sexual. Theo loses a bet against Isabella, and he has to. And now, if you're a young person, don't follow this because this is for adults only. This film, so he has to masturbate in front of her, and this shocks Matthew, who doesn't understand why siblings could be so sexual with each other. It's interesting since the original film, or I think in the original story, they're talking about threesomes, something like that. But actually, now that I follow the original much closer, from what I've heard, that Les Enfants Terribles, it is more about, and look at this, very fascinating, right? Like the play on titles. Gilbert Adair's one is the holy, so pure, innocent. Well, in the French version, it's terrible. So it's just very interesting how different cultures can view the same material and give it a different spin. So there's more to this, and I'm only on the surface right now, but there was talk. I read briefly a bit of commentary, not in depth, because I like getting my own thoughts on each film, but it was originally going to be about a couple, but then they said that wouldn't provide shock value, so it has to be about twins, because in the 2000s there was more sexual liberalism. And I found it interesting, and you see how if it's twins, it reads differently from if it's a couple. And I like the Gilbert's take that it's supposed to be very pure and innocent in their own way. And from what I saw in the movie by Couture, his take is more like there's more characters and there's more. ideas thrown around, like that twins are part of it or the siblings are part of it, but there's more, much more going on. And I'll probably review that film as well and that book in the future, sometime in the future. So Matthew and Isabel and Theo become closer, and this is a typo right here. Become closer to each other. They start playing games. These games involve acting out a film and getting others to guess which film is it. So they're very interesting games, and they evolve into punishment or forfeit, as they call it, when the opponent cannot guess the film. Isabel makes Theo masturbate in front of her. Matthew finds this all quite weird. They get even more sexual. So Matthew at this point is just trying to understand the twins. He's enjoying the ride. Like, he's an American in France, in Paris. So it's kind of, he reminds me of Henry Miller or just any writer from the who moved to Paris, any American writer. I know Ernest Hemingway and others also moved there. But he's just trying to decipher what's going on. And we're going to see that as the film progresses. It's just Matthew trying to intellectualize or understand that twins. And yeah, and he finds it, he's a bit put off by this whole masturbation stuff. And we also see a bit of innocence in Matthew as well. So it's crazy, but like, in Gilbert Adair's, his title really nailed the film, the idea of holy innocence, because they're very innocent in a way. Matthew as well, we're gonna see how he runs away and doesn't try to have sex with Isabel, because part of him just doesn't want to get involved as well. And Theo demands that Isabel and Matthew has sex. Isabel does a sexy dance, which I capture, and both of them are mesmerized, and the film is very Bertolucci, because I've watched a little bit of Io e Te, and there's a similar undressing scene. And also Matthew, and this, I have to choose my words carefully here, but honestly I don't, because I'm just being straightforward. So Bertolucci is heterosexual, but I feel Gilbert might be homosexual or bisexual from what I read some commentary. So I also thought maybe Matthew's character was written as bisexual, which he seems to be in a way, or also he might not be sexually awakened either. There's also some hints to that. But Bertolucci makes him more heterosexual, because at first he seems to like both of the guy and the girl. So, but the girl a little bit more than the guy. So because Bertolucci dropped a lot of the homosexual content in Adair's book, but he made him more heterosexual. Also, it seems originally it was a couple that was doing it, hence why Theo would have been a cuckold. But here, since it's his sister, he seems more like a witness. And yeah, that key quote is, "You're two halves of the same person." Yeah, and it's very interesting, because if it was a couple, Theo would have been a cuckold-like character, so you would have introduced a different dynamic. How does it feel to have your significant other have sex with someone else? But because they're twins, it changes the dynamic, because then it feels like Theo, of course, he couldn't have sex with his sister, so it makes it seem more like he just also wants to get involved. Like, there's like a love triangle, but it's not just physical between them. It's more like they just really like each other. References. What says that Rima Akbar from other films is very bookish connoisseur, and I think I mentioned the references here, and I'm not 100% sure I mentioned Dylan, but I think I might have mentioned him in my previous video, so I don't wanna repeat that. 1 minute, guys. My friends, let's continue. So I didn't mention Dylan, and I'll mention him briefly. So we hear Dylan's Queen Jane. It fits right in, given how Dylan protested the Vietnam War, as well as being an icon of the counterculture. And the harmonica used in Queen Jane feels very heartfelt, and it suits that running in the rain scene. I like to add that nothing feels forced. It all fits very naturally, and it seems that Dylan is more of... And about that Dylan song, I also felt that if Dylan reprimanded this Queen Jane, just like in the Rolling Stone, where he also reprimands this other girl. And also Dylan's a talented writer who ended up winning a Nobel Prize, and we can easily say he's right up there with many of the high culture figures mentioned in this film. So, of course, this film is very high culture because of all the references, all the bookishness. I feel like you would have to be, of course, if you're a master's degree on cinema studies, you can get the film. But I feel it's more towards the bookish side. It's not a more towards an educated middle class person, depending on where you live, or upper middle class person. Like it's not, it doesn't feel like a film just for like mass audiences who don't have any like cinema knowledge. So yeah, and just like I did Dylan's Queen Jane, I plan on doing Sublime in the future because I really like their songs. So I do plan on reviewing films, guys. So bear with me and expect that it's gonna happen. So the dialogue in the second part is spot on. For instance, Isabelle tells Matthew, "This is a test. Are you gonna pass it or fail it?" We see how they're determined. They're trying to determine if Matthew's worth it to join in the group, and Isabelle has a very commanding presence. It feels like Isabelle could erupt anytime and just yell at both of them, and they tend to just follow her lead. In a way, it's another key dialogue. I want you to do it the way you did when you thought no one was watching. And definitely Isabelle is trying to, this is when she's trying to convince Theo of masturbating in front of Matthew and her. And yeah, it works very well, and it just gives intensity to that character. I feel like she just comes off as a very intense, very passionate character, and she's just gonna explode with emotion. And in terms of acting, I feel Matthew is coming together much better now in this second part. He's becoming more confident. It is interesting the way Matthew smells Theo's clothing in one scene, and then he keeps Isabella's picture, and it shows he likes both of them. So that's a hint Bertolucci has been giving us, that he likes both of the characters equally. And setting. And more than the setting, what stands out from this film is the imagery. For instance, how Matthew leans on the window with his watch, and Cigarettes After Sex, they released a video, or their fans released a video where we see that kind of imagery. And we also see lights and shadow of the rain. And Larry Clark has mentioned the idea of film being lights and shadows, and I see a lot of that here. So for some reason with this film, I watch it just out of the enjoyment of the imagery, just of the enjoyment of the characters and the dialogue. Like it's less about the plot. It feels very character heavy. It's more just trying to spend time with these characters, trying to understand them, trying to enjoy the visuals of the film. And as I said earlier, very artistic and old portraits. So let's go back to that key scene, that twins and Matthew are running. We'll see a lot of the interests are highly intellectual and historical. None of them are searching for references to books. We see the beginning of sexual activity as well. And we also see them playing the game of backgammon. And this game is very popular in the Middle East. And I bet since there's a lot of... France have received a lot of people from Algeria as well, and I bet it's gotten popular in France, but can't be spot on. But definitely backgammon, very popular, and the player must anticipate their opponent move, and this is a parallel to Theo's and Isabelle relationship. And I'm gonna skip on outfits because we're running out of time, guys, but I really wanted to read this, the conclusion. So Matthew says, "You're two halves of the same person." Drank a bit of milk because otherwise I was rushing a bit. But anyway, so Matthew says, "You're two halves of the same person." Matthew tells the twins, "I feel it's a good point to end this second part." What does Matthew mean? As viewers, we're still wondering about it. We see that Matthew has won the twins' trust. Now that he's part of them, the relationship evolved from fun to seeing them get physical. We see Matthew sees Theo masturbate, and then Theo makes Matthew and Isabelle have sex. I feel their relationship is closer than I thought, and sex acts as a bridge to unite them. to me, this part makes them physically closer, and ourselves as the audience, we also sense that. But Matthew needs to decipher what's going on.